Howdy.
That's my pain.
I'm David Mandell, and I'm going to lead a session on identifying pain. For those of you who do not know me, I am the CEO and founder of PivotDesk, which is unfortunately not in Seattle yet, but hopefully soon. And for the past 13 years of my life, I've been doing startups, so PivotDesk is my fourth startup. But prior to doing startups, I spent a lot of time of my life in the agency world in New York. And having done a few of my own startups and also working with accelerators like Techstars for a long time, I've worked with many, many entrepreneurs trying to build everyone potentially a tremendous business. And I've consistently seen a single big hurdle that was not obvious to many people, but because of my marketing background was obvious to me, and I thought it was worth discussing. So I pulled together some of my great Seattle-based entrepreneurial friends and figured we'd have a little discussion. And the concept is all about identifying pain and understanding that unless you can truly connect emotionally with a pain point for your target audience, you're going to spend a lot of time running around in circles. So I'm going to kick off with kind of the basis for the talk. And this is, so I'm going to make you two promises before we start. The first is I will do my absolute best to add as much value as I can. And the second is I will be completely transparent and open with any questions. So I think over the course of my history, I see too many people sit up here and they feel like there's a strange barrier between them and the audience, and they have to give corporate lines and corporate answers, and I think that's bullshit. So we will definitely have Q&A at the end. If you have a question you'd like to ask in the middle, please just raise your hand and scream. I'd prefer to be as interactive as possible. So before I go on and go into this, you guys want to give some quick intros? My friend Rand from Moz.
So I'm Rand Fishkin. I'm the CEO and founder of Moz. I spoke here yesterday too, but I'll give a quick brief background. I dropped out of college in 2001, started doing web design development. That moved into eventually an SEO consulting business, which in 2007 changed into an SEO software business. And that's similar to the business that we're running today. We recently rebranded from SEO Moz to Moz. So on all your lanyards, if you look down at that blue Moz, that's us. And Moz is really built to help marketers, professional marketers, with analytics around things that happen before people get to their site. So search, social, links, mentions, that sort of stuff. We're 130 people, almost all here in Seattle. We have a small Portland office. And I have been through a tremendous amount of pain building this company, doing every dumb, stupid thing in the book that you can possibly imagine. Many of them so dumb that you'd be like, wait, why would they bring him onto the stage? He shouldn't be allowed to sit in that chair next to David and Grant. Those guys know what they're doing.
That's exactly why you're here.
Yeah. They wanted the one guy who would make them look really good. That's my job.
That's absolutely untrue, as everybody knows. My name is Grant Feek. I'm from Tread, T-R-E-D, not T-R-E-A-D. We're in the car shopping space. We deliver test drives and now sort of the whole car shopping experience to the homes and offices of car shoppers. We're only in Seattle. We're 7 people. So we're brand new. I'm honored to be here and sitting next to these two. Super exciting. Look forward to chatting.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So I love this slide. And honestly, if you remember just one thing from this incredible droning on conversation that we're going to have for the next hour, please remember this. This is the single biggest lie in marketing. Hey, tell me what you do. Nobody gives a shit what you do. Nobody. They only care about how you're going to make them feel. And until you can understand that, it's incredibly hard to build, pitch, manage, and grow a business. And I see this so many times, especially when you have tech-focused founders, right? And they're building what could be incredible things, amazing things, right? But they're so deep in the thing that they never pick their head up to actually talk about how it might affect their audience. And it's missing that connection that stops, I think, way too many people from understanding how turning a great idea into what could be a great business. So I've got my own stories, but I'd rather start with some of my panelists here. So Rand, give me a couple of quick, real good anecdotal stories about some realizations you had about your audience over the course of your business evolution that changed the way you talked about or focused or provided value.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to go back a few years. I'll start with, how many folks in the audience were familiar with like the old SEO Moz and sort of, our SEO tools and that kind of stuff? Oh, wow, a lot of you. That's cool. So back in the day, we had this product called Linkscape, right? And our idea in 2007, we raised money from Ignition Partners. Michelle Goldberg, who I think was at the conference yesterday, even though I didn't get to run into her, she sort of reached out in '07 and said, hey, is there somewhere we could take this business? Because we're seeing this sort of subscription business that you've built take off. And I said, yeah. You know what I hate? I hate that Google took away the link command. Do you guys remember, like back in the day, you could type link : whatever your site is or your page is into Google, and they would give you a list of all the links that Google knew about that pointed to your site or whatever site on the internet. And they stopped doing it. They took it away. They took it away, I think, first in like 2004, they kind of deprecated the functionality, and then by '07, they had taken it away completely. And then Yahoo got rid of theirs in 2010, which was kind of the last search engine to offer that service. And so I told Michelle, I want to build the back end of Google. And she went, oh, okay. Well, let's give that a shot. Let's see what we can do, which was crazy at the time, but she helped us out. We fundraised $1.1 million from her and Kelly Smith, and we built this. We actually did it. We had these two engineers. They were both sort of friends of my wife's, and they came on board. The three of us huddled in the rooms, right? So it's like the CEO, two engineers, get in a room and build a web index. It was not the back end of Google, but it was a web index. It did function. I think it had about, I don't remember what it was, like 30 million or so pages at the time. Sorry. Yeah, something like that. And we made a product that, if you looked at it, was the ugliest, weirdest user interface. It had, like, you would type in your URL, you'd put in tread.com or whatever it was, it would show you links, but every link was like a huge box with a ton of 25 different metrics that were telling you things about that individual link. So scrolling through was a complete pain in the butt. You had to use the CSV export to basically do anything and then play around in Excel to try and format this stuff. It was my dream product and what I know today to be one of the most awful products that Moz has ever made. And the realization came as we started watching people use it. Right? Like, you go and you watch people use it, and there are people who really desperately want this information. They can't get it from Google anymore. It's just super sucky experience. They can't figure it out. They don't understand why these things are here. And that made us change. And in I think it was January of 2010, we launched the next version, which was Open Site Explorer. And that's been probably one of our most successful products to date. I would say second only behind Moz Analytics now.
So how did you observe the pain that they went through, and how did that affect the transition into the new version?
Well, I think it was, what we really saw, I think the big insight was seeing people use another source. They were still going to Yahoo and using link domain or the Yahoo Site Explorer, essentially not because they could get more or better information, but because it listed things in the way that they wanted, right? It was familiar and comfortable. It looked like search results, which we are all very familiar with search results. Linkscape looked like, I don't know, someone made AutoCAD for marketers. It was very strange.
Right, but so that's an interesting revelation, because when that happens, right, when you build a product and you see people using it, way too many times I see the founders or people deep in the company saying, but they're just not using it right.
They're just not using it right.
They don't get it.
They don't get it.
Right, they're not using it right. And the reality there is, no, they're doing what they're going to do, and until you can accept the fact that they don't care what you do, right, you have to give them something that solves their pain that they can use. You're going to keep butting your head against the brick wall, right?
Only Comcast gets to build an experience that no one likes and still have dominant market share, right? Like,
I'd argue not only Comcast, but yeah, but quite a few. But that's really,
Exxon also gets to do that.
But that's really kind of the revelation when you talk about identifying pain. It's getting your head out of your own shorts, right? And I use that term a lot when you're cranking on a business and trying to build it. And by the way, this isn't just about business, right? This is about marketing too. It's about product. It's about services. If you've got a marketing firm or a digital agency or whatever it is, you still want to understand what the pain point of your customer is. And if you go into a meeting and you say, hey, we're a digital agency, when you improve your SEO, and we're going to get you better exposure, we're going to drive more traffic, like, how many other people can say that? How are you differentiating? How are you connecting with the pain of the customer, right? So let's hold that thought, because I want to go deeper on that in a second, but let's go over to Grant, because you had a pretty cool hypothesis, and you were building a business on it, right? And I'll let you kind of explain it, and then you kind of ended up in Techstars, right? And we're forced to re-examine that a little, right?
Yeah,
So,
I had a cool hypothesis that was no more than a hypothesis, as it turned out. Yeah, so I think pain is a really interesting subject, and it applies to entrepreneurs that are just starting businesses as well as to big businesses too. In my case, I originally had intended to build a platform around custom ordering an automobile. So the pain point that I was solving was, you're looking for a particular configuration of a car, and you go to the lot and it's not there. And so you have to get something that's the wrong color or has the wrong features. And that was a pain point to me, and it had been for me, but as it turned out, it was sort of what I would maybe call a 5% problem, not a 80 or 90% problem. And luckily, I bumbled my way into Techstars, and I spent a lot of time talking to car shoppers, and realized over time that there's a much larger pain point that we were not exploring. And the way we did that, in our case, was it started with doing surveys. And I think it's interesting that you need to listen to people when you're sort of probing for pain in the very beginnings of a company. And there are different ways you can do that. And there are pros and cons to using different avenues. You can survey, which gives you scale and a lot of access to different opinions. You can interview people one-on-one. You can focus group, which is kind of a hybrid. And what we did initially is we did a lot of surveying. And we did things like ask people, of these 5 problems with buying a car, having to haggle over a price, having to go talk to a salesperson, having to do X, Y, and Z, what would you say is the worst part of buying a car? And then we had a free-form open area where the person could enter in their own response. And we got thousands of, we just used SurveyMonkey and paid like 10 cents a survey and got lots of responses to that. And we found a lot of interesting things in the free-form response area that we hadn't even thought of. And so we spent a lot of time exploring that, refining it, doing another survey. And then once we kind of got to a point where we felt like we were getting somewhere and sort of focusing in on a specific part of the problem, we then started to do a lot more interviewing and focus grouping and taking $5 Starbucks cards and going to Starbucks and just loitering the hell out of the Starbucks, basically, and got kicked out of a number of them.
You know there's someone from Starbucks here.
Yeah, sorry. And Starbucks has been good to us in many ways. Had those conversations and talked to people about car shopping and sort of got more context and sort of realized, well, most of the big problems people have around buying cars are actually about being at a dealership. And so how can we fix that? How can we make that better? And so it sort of evolved from a custom order platform to a platform around really allowing shoppers to shop for cars, to experience cars, to compare cars, to purchase cars, all from their home or office without having to go there. And eventually, there are other ways we think we can do even more. So, so I think it really, pain really applies to the, in the context of starting a company. I think it also really applies in the context of sort of growing a company. When we do our user research, we really work hard to sort of know what is happening and also why it's happening. And you can do that as well. Similarly, tools like Mixpanel sort of allow you to track what's happening, and then other tools like user interviews allow you to really understand sort of why it's happening. And
Yeah, so that constant contact with your audience is really critical, and that can be really challenging depending on the model of your business. So, we, as PivotDesk, and I'm not sure if you guys, yes?
I'm sorry. I wanted to ask a quick question.
Go right ahead. Could you just use the microphone for me? But
I'm going to guess you're going to ask, what do we do? Okay, because I didn't mention that to anybody.
You mentioned that the 5% part where you said it was your world about the problem. It was your pain point. But at some point, you saw the other 95% problem. How hard was it for you to get convinced about that? And was it somebody else that had to tell you? Because that's kind of a problem that I would think a lot of people have, because I'm solving for my problem, and I don't know what I don't know, and hindsight is 20/20.
It's a really good question, and it's really hard to let go of something like that. And I think a lot of people aren't able to do that when they need to quickly enough, or don't maybe realize that they need to. In my case, it was, I think part of being an entrepreneur is listening, especially in the car shopping space, which kind of everybody can understand, unlike a lot of other startups, these two. Everyone has an opinion. And so I think your number one job is to make your company into sort of a greatest hits version of all these opinions that you've heard, and take a nugget from here and a nugget from there. In my case, it was just lots of people saying basically, this is what I don't like, this is what we don't like, and this is what we want to do. And the hardest thing for me actually wasn't getting behind it myself. The hardest thing was getting my CTO behind it. Because I had been cramming him down this rabbit hole, just physically, of go build the world's best configurator that works across every car brand and every car model. And if you know anything about cars, which some of you might, those configurators, you need to know which packages go together, how the conflicts work. It's really complicated. And I had him 4 months down this path, brilliant guy, of building this thing. And suddenly I was going, actually, starting tomorrow, we're going to scrap that. And so if I couldn't get him on board, we had a problem. And so it's not just yourself. And it should be just yourself, actually. I think it's important when you're first starting a business. This is what I tell, when people are silly enough to talk to me for advice. I always tell them, look, you don't want to hire an engineer. You don't want to hire anybody yet. And even if you are an engineer, don't code anything. What you need to do is get a SurveyMonkey account or whatever other survey tool you want to use. Go buy $105 gift cards from Starbucks and start probing and testing your hypothesis. There's so much you can learn. You can ask things like, would you use a tool that does X? Why would you use it? Would you pay to use it? How much would you pay to use it? There are so many questions you can ask and so much you can learn. Anyway, hope that answers your question.
And I'm going to reinforce a couple of things there, which I think are really important. The before you code thing, I think, is critical. And a lot of people, they're so enamored with what they want to build that they just dive right in. So PivotDesk, if you're not familiar at all with PivotDesk, we help entrepreneurs find room to grow their businesses. And we do that by matching them up with companies that have excess space. And we provide a management platform that helps both sides manage that relationship for as long as it works. We're now in 6 markets. We've got hundreds and hundreds of customers. Before we did anything, we went door to door with a piece of paper. We didn't code a thing. We literally knocked on doors, called up, sat down with people, and said, how does this feel to you? And we didn't ask leading questions. So that's kind of similar to what Graham was talking about before. Surveys, interviews, et cetera. A lot of people tell you what they think you want to hear. And it's very hard to sort through the noise. But what's important is not so much what they say, it's the emotion. And there's different ways of keying in on the emotion, and I'll talk about that in a second. But people will give you a lot of answers, but when you watch their face, it's like, oh yeah, I don't like that. That bugs me. That bugs me. No, I don't like that. Right? And you can see a transition in their face, or you can see a transition in how they react to content and what they key in on content. And it's really that emotion that's the opportunity. And if you start getting consistency around that emotion, that's an opportunity, because that's a real pain, right? And solving someone's pain is how you build a a big business. So so Grant was talking a little bit about different ways to uncover the pain, and he was talking about surveying and interviews, which is great if you've got a somewhat definable audience you can talk to about what you're trying to do, right? Grant is in a different situation. Rand is in a different situation because he's got thousands of customers that he never sees nor talks to, right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
We have a few mechanisms that we've built over time. One of them that I think is terrifically valuable is we have a customer advisory board of about 300 or 400 sort of hardcore long-term customers, heavy users of our platform, and actually heavy users of many of our competitors' tools as well. Because for those of you who are in the marketing world, we sort of use everything we can, right? We'll find any tool we can. And so that's been very helpful to have someone. We actually have a team of 3 folks who work with our customer advisory board. One person in particular who kind of plays point on that. But we do a lot of other stuff. So we look very heavily at usage and user data inside the platform, right? When you have a large number of users, you can afford to do that. And then we've done something kind of interesting a few times, which is some sampling. So we worked with a company a few years ago called Conversion Rate Experts. They're out of the UK. It's literally, I know this is going to sound weird, I think it's literally like a rocket scientist and a psychology professor, right? Like these are the guys who started this company. And they have this methodology that I love and have used ever since. So they essentially talk to 3 different cohorts of our customers, or potential customers. They talk to people who had never used Moz, but fit the profile of our customers. So essentially, these are marketers in-house or consultants agencies. They talk to a second group, people who had tried our product, but quit, had left, weren't using it anymore. And then they talk to people who tried it and stayed. And they ask the same kinds of questions. What made you first want to try it? What do you love about it? What didn't work for you? They ask the people who didn't try it, why didn't you try it? And then they'd been asking the people who had tried it, what were the pain points that you overcame, and how did you overcome them? And from that, they took away this incredible amount of knowledge about what made people convert, what made people like the product, and that when we applied it, it took our conversion rate, I think it almost tripled it. And in a year when we had predicted we were going to do about 1.9 million in revenue, we did 3.1. This was a few years ago. That was the first time
I'd like to be in that board meeting. That's a good board meeting.
It was, it was really exciting. I mean, and that was a year when we couldn't raise money.
Right.
So we were going out for funding, couldn't raise money. Conversion Rate Experts was essentially what raised money for us.
Nice.
It's a powerful thing to just have those interviews.
Yeah.
And then they didn't even need that many. They just took the answers and they, aggregated them and said, okay, this is a representative sample set. We're going to go change the landing pages and make some product changes.
Yeah, but I think the key there is they were asking and listening, right? You weren't just heads down building, right? You were asking and listening and reacting. And so we have, at PivotDesk, we have what we call market managers in each market, and they work with our customers, both the guests and the hosts, and we talk to literally every single one of our customers over the course of the process. And we get a lot of questions around, automation in the site and how we scale it and how this is going to go really big. And the reality is we do almost all of it by hand right now. And we do that for a reason. Because when we're sitting in front of our customers and we're talking about the service and we're talking about their pain and how they like it and what they want to do, our market managers are getting data around not only what drives our customers, but what our customers want and what they have to spend time doing. And every 2 weeks when we go through our 2-week sprint planning, our market managers download to our developers and say, these are my top 3 pains in the asses this week. Right? These are the things that I'm dealing with every customer. How do we build that? Right? And that drives our product roadmap. Right? We don't sit in a room and say, hey, what should we do next? We listen to what our customers tell us, and that's what we develop. So having that feedback on an ongoing basis, again, whether it's just a client and you're a service provider or a technology app and you've got thousands of customers, there's always ways to kind of get that input and understand what that pain point is. So you have another, so you do a lot of content creation, right? And you're kind of famous for your whiteboard discussions and that kind of thing. That must be a really interesting way, too, of understanding, like when you talk about certain issues, like which topics get the most response?
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
and we have a ton of cool metrics about that. So we can, we produce a metric ton of content. I actually almost think we produce too much. I think we should scale back and make it a smaller amount, but better and higher quality. And that, over the years, has led us to a lot of pathways in terms of knowing what people are passionate about in the space, what's up and coming. So we could see for a number of years, that links were really huge in the mid-2000s. And we could see over the last few years that social data and mentions data, as it relates to search, is really big for our audience. And so those are both things that we put into the new platform. And I think content is a great, it's brilliant on both sides, because what you find out is you find out whether people are actually passionate about it, and then you bring them to you, right? They become part of your audience, and so now marketing to them is much more natural, and they already know you and like you and trust you on this subject. So it's funny that you mentioned SurveyMonkey, and we don't use it a ton for product. We do a little bit, but I use it for content. Like I'll tweet out a link and I'll say, hey, which of these 5 blog posts would you really want to see me write? And then I'll produce the one that wins, right? 'Cause
Yeah, just ask.
Yeah, just ask.
Just ask your audience, right? So before
I think you have to build an audience first, though.
Yes.
That can be really hard, right? So door to door, like you were talking about, is a great way to start that process. And then, kind of the way that we started was through content. Right. Started a blog, and that built up a small audience that grew and grew. Now it's a powerful channel and medium for us.
Another really neat thing about content marketing, just as a brief aside, is what you're doing essentially when you're doing content marketing is you're making a site that your audience wants to see, or you're trying to. Whereas, if you're spending your money on AdWords, the downside is you have nothing. And there's nothing left
You
over.
pay one time, right? You pay AdWords for that one click. You get that one visitor. Nothing else, like you get no other benefit from that, as opposed to that piece of content where you might spend time and energy and even money to develop that piece, and then it lasts, right? It lasts forever. It can drive traffic for a long time. It can rank in search engines. It can get social shares. It can have user engagement. People can email it to each other. So I love the power that it can build.
Yeah, and Grant, so I know, so Tread, you've kind of got a marketplace issue, right? So you've got both dealers on one side and customers on the other. Like, how do you balance making both sides happy, right? Like, how do you identify both?
It's a great question. I mean, so we have, marketplaces are really neat because you get to create, I think if you
Really neat, yeah.
if you make both sides happy, you create really neat barriers to entry. But the downside is creating a marketplace is extremely difficult because you have to generate the supply and the demand. And we're actually at a point right now where on the dealer side, we're getting a lot of really interesting feedback from dealers outside of Seattle. And kind of the thing about Tread is it takes a lot of, you need feet on the ground, you need to deliver cars, it's very operationally intensive. There are logistics, there's consumer marketing. So we can't just flip a switch and turn ourselves on, and the dealers that we hear from in Chicago and New York and LA and the Bay Area. But, there are things that we can do, and we're exploring that right now. And we'll be testing probably some sort of hybrid model pretty soon in another city. That's sort of a slightly different way than we envisioned operating Tread. But I think it, as long as it meets kind of my expectations for the consumer's end experience, I think it might work. So, it's interesting I think it is really important that the ethos of your company includes this kind of listen to your customer and also listen to all of your customers on both sides if you do have a marketplace, as you grow it, because, when you're receiving inbound email for something that you haven't even considered, it's a clue.
But that kind of stuff can be really distracting too. Yeah. I mean, I've found that the lack of focus sometimes is much of a killer as we're building the wrong thing, right? So you can go build tons of right things, and then
Very true, and that's a big danger for us right now. To be totally honest,
Don't do it, man. I've been down that road. I swear to you,
away
it's so
from the light.
painful.
is this thing recorded? Oh gosh, okay, I better be careful what I say. No, we have a lot of different. We're definitely at a point right now where we're considering affiliations with a number of different, third-party websites, manufacturer websites, dealer websites, what's called tier 2 dealer websites, which are dealer group websites, and then how do we think about expansion? So there's no question that focusing in different areas can be a real killer. But at the same time, how do you balance that with listening to your supply side of your marketplace? Is a question that remains to be seen. One story I wanted to tell on the customer side, I sort of mentioned mixed panel and talked about surveying versus sort of interviewing people at Starbucks with a $5 gift card. I think sort of the analog to that is when you're running a business, at least a young business like ours, is we use mixed panel to really tell us what is happening. And we use interviewing, user testing. If somebody's sitting in front of their computer screen, we're watching them physically. They come to our office or we'll go to them, which is more in line with our company is when we go to them, I guess, and watch them use it. We had a page on our website that was converting at like 20%, and we could not figure it out. And we spent like a week arguing about it pretty violently, which was terrible. And we brought one person in. We're finally like, well, God, we should bring somebody in. Like, no shit, you should bring some. So we brought somebody in, and she got to the page that we were having trouble with, and we're all just like sitting there. Like, we all have our own theories. We're all like hoping that, we're right, because it's, ego, stupid stuff. And we're all sitting there waiting for her to like say what she's gonna say. And she's like, oh, what is a trim? And trim is this weird, nuanced term that doesn't really mean anything. It's like a submodel within a model family of a car. And she didn't know what that word meant. And we were just like, oh. And so we fixed that word, and it fixed the entire page. So as important as the mixed panel data was to tell us what is happening, that like
The why.
The why was like a 2-minute, no pain, and like it was so easy. It was the easiest thing we could have ever done, and we could have saved ourselves a week. So I just think that's a really interesting thing. Like, you need to continue to, whatever you're selling, whether you're selling to businesses or customers. And I should say also, I feel like saying we suck at this. Like, I don't want to sound like we're experts at this. We're not as good at this as we should be. And that's an example of us like barely being good enough to stay alive. But, I think it's worth at least, hopefully it's helpful. I don't know.
And it can be kind of dangerous too, because a lot of times you'll get a bunch of people, smart people in the room who care about this landing page, who care about this process, and they'll go, well, let's test all of our theories. We'll run a conversion rate optimization test, landing page test. We'll put unbounce on here, test these 6 different versions, see which one converts best. And if you haven't done the hard work of actually talking to people and watch people use that first, you don't have the right kinds of insights, right? Like, I think in my own head, even though I'm telling you this right now, I know I'm gonna, in my future, do this dumb thing that you and I both do again and again, where I'll go and I'll be like, oh, well, this is the problem. You gotta fix that. And I don't actually know.
Yeah, so I think there's a really interesting point there, and sometimes smart can be dangerous.
And experienced.
Even worse.
Even
right?
worse.
And I'll give you some very real anecdotes about this. So before I got into the startup world, I was at Deloitte Consulting, and I ran all their global communications. And I got very used to being the stupidest person in the room, because I worked with incredibly high-paid, incredibly intelligent experts on business reengineering or SAP implementation, or you name your buzzword of the late 90s, right? And synergies, reengineering, collaboration, corporate kinetics, whatever the fucking buzzword is. Anyway, so we'd sit in these rooms, and these are people that could go 8 miles deep on this silo, right? They could tell you anything you ever wanted to know about this issue, probably one of the top 5 smartest people in the world about that issue. And we'd sit down, and they'd explain to me, and they'd say, hey, we should market this service because I know more about this than anybody, and I think this should be on the cover of Time magazine. I'd say, that's awesome, but I don't have a clue what you're talking about. And do you think the people that are going to buy our services have a clue what you're talking about? And until I could get them to understand that you need to be able to talk about what you do in a way that your audience gets it, that was a whole new concept for a lot of these people. And it's a whole new concept for a lot of great potential tech founders, right? Because they're incredibly smart people, and they figured out an algorithm that could change the world. But for the life of them, they can't describe it to anyone, and they certainly can't describe how it's going to affect the potential audience. So I'm going to skip ahead here, kind of 2 slides, right? This is a framework I use with a lot of people. It's very basic, but very, very difficult, right? And especially with developers that are building what could be amazing stuff. Until you can actually explain each of these bullets clearly and coherently, you don't know what business you're building. You don't know who you're building it for. You don't know how to market because you don't understand their pain. You don't know how to put it in relative context to potential competition, which could be another business doing what you're doing, or it could simply be what they currently do, which is different. And until you can really describe each one of these bullets specifically, right? I can't tell you how many people I talk to that are building something cool, and I say, well, who's that for? And they say, oh, anyone. I'm like, cool. You got about $3 million in the bank to spend on marketing and runway to convince everyone and anyone they should use what you're doing? No. Understand exactly who you're trying to serve with what you're doing, right?
This is kind of fun. I'm trying it right now in my head.
Yeah, go for it, I dare you.
Really?
Yeah.
For professional web marketers who want to improve traffic from non-paid channels, Moz is software to help them measure and improve their efforts, as opposed to Google Analytics, which just tells them how they got visits. What is the last one?
Moz again. Moz. So what's your differentiation from the competition?
Oh, Moz gives you insight and actionable advice before visitors even reach you. Eh?
80%.
80%.
So I'll push on the pain part, which is relevant, right? So not for professional marketers who want to improve conversion, for professional marketers who are frustrated because they have no idea how to improve conversion
Or traffic.
or traffic or whatever. Like, understand it's about emotion, right? And it's about connecting with the emotional pain that the target audience feels. And
Is that how you came up with the name for the panel? That was smart.
Thank you. But it's understanding that emotional connection. People buy based on emotion. They justify with logic. We spew logic all day long and expect it to work, right? And until you can really communicate with the pain in an emotional way, you can't really create that connection with your target audience. I mean, I'll give you, I'll use myself as an example. So PivotDesk is a real estate management tool that provides interactions between financial transactions, communication transactions, and historical transactions to facilitate the transactions of excess real estate.
That was horrible.
How interesting is that? Would you buy that? Would you use that? No. PivotDesk helps entrepreneurs find room to grow their businesses. Because we know when you're starting a business, you should be 100% focused on your business. Unfortunately, almost all of us spend 20 to 30% of our time just trying to figure out where the hell to put it. And that sucks. So what PivotDesk does is connect people trying to build great businesses with other great businesses that have excess space and help both sides manage that relationship for as long as it works for both sides. Same company. Very, very different description, right? One is based on pain and emotion. The other is based on a description of what we do. They're both correct. Which one is more effective from a marketing perspective? Right. So
Don't visit our landing page for a few days, okay?
You got it.
I'll second that.
It's just because I'm old and I've seen it before. That's it.
No, that's great insight, David. That's really awesome.
Yeah. So I just, I think the topic is something that I see so many people tripping up on when they're trying to build and grow businesses, and they forget that this is how do I address an audience pain and build a solution that people are willing to pay for, right? And until you can connect with them emotionally, it's hard to even understand where you're trying to go as a business, because you're just heads down trying to build cool stuff. And cool stuff is awesome, but it ultimately doesn't make that much money unless you actually can connect with someone that'll pay for it.
And I think this kind of thing is also really important to understand, because it can serve as kind of an internal guide. Because like the conversation we're having about dealers and shoppers, there are times when you're going to be stuck. Who do we please? What do we focus on? And if you can go back to something like this that says Company X is, what is your at the core? What is your core mission, basically? And having that sort of thing written on the wall, we actually have a wall of norms, and they change like every week because we'll screw one up and take it down and put another one up. But I think those things are really important too, just so everybody's kind of on the same page in the company.
So being on the same page is critical, is a really important point.
So hard,
right?
so
And
hard.
I know a lot of CEOs that have worked really hard on this and do a good job of describing this, but if you ask their employees what the company does, you'd get 32 different answers. Right? What does that do for focus in a business? Right? When you're trying to start a business, the only asset you have is focus and speed. Right? Because there's people out there with a lot more energy, a lot more money, a lot more bandwidth than you have. And if you don't have your whole team focused on trying to get to the next point, you're wasting time and resources. And this happens way too often. Right, and it's hard. It's hard to get everyone to say the same thing.
How do you do that? How do you get that team alignment? Especially, once you're 3 digits of employees.
So you say it once, and then you say it again, and you say it again, and you say it again. And it's really your job as the founder or the CEO or the leader of the company to always espouse the direction and vision of the company. And I'll give you another anecdote that really brought this home for me. So again, when I was at Deloitte, so I was brought into Deloitte because back in the 90s, they were separating the consulting practice from the tax and audit practice because they were going to take on Andersen Consulting, who had just split with Arthur Andersen, or now Accenture. And we put together a pretty aggressive positioning for the company. And I'll give you some quick background. So back then, the goal of Deloitte was to get into proposals for $40 million consulting gigs and up. And the landscape was pretty interesting because Andersen Consulting was spending about $100 million a year on marketing. They were in every airport ad you ever saw. And McKinsey & Company had been around for 800 years, and everybody knew who they were. And then there was everybody else. So I think I actually just saw today, I think Coopers & Lybrand is buying Booz Allen or something like that today, right? But back then it was Coopers & Lybrand, it was Price Waterhouse, there was Coopers, there was 7 other consulting firms all vying for that space. And we realized that if we had any hope at all of getting into that game, we had to get incredibly aggressive and specific. This was not about golf players and airport ads. This was about really targeted messages specifically at the pain points of our audience. So we put together a campaign, and I think at that year, the first year, we spent about $6 million total versus Andersen's $100 million. And we put together a campaign that was focused directly at Andersen and McKinsey, which no one in the industry had ever really done. And they were very simple ads. It was kind of us and them type format. And on the left side, it said, McKinsey & Company, we don't learn from our clients, their standards aren't high enough, which we pulled right from their website. Right, went right at the pain that everyone that ever worked with McKinsey, no one ever got fired for hiring McKinsey, but everyone that worked with them always felt a little inferior, right? Because McKinsey had this attitude like, we're the smart fucks, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to pay us millions of dollars and we're just going to tell you what to do, so sit down and shut up. So we connected with that fear directly. And then we went at Andersen, and it said Andersen Consulting, top management consultant for the past 10 years, blah, blah, blah. And on the right it said Deloitte Consulting, being the biggest doesn't necessarily mean being the best. And we played directly on the frustration that anyone that hired Andersen had to deal with what they call the IROC effect, where they'd roll up buses of idiots right out of college and swamp your firm with hundreds of people. Right? And so we went directly at both of these people, and we put together positioning for Deloitte, which was a very different approach for very different results. And I worked with the global CEO. And about 6 months into the campaign, the CEO was talking to me and said, "God damn it, I am so tired of saying this." He said, "But you know what? It's starting to work." And unfortunately, that is the dichotomy. Like, you have to be single-mindedly focused on what your story is. And I joke around a lot, but I'm actually not joking. When I work with new founders, I say, if someone shakes you in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. and wakes you up in bed and say, "What do?" You need to say the same damn thing every time. Because that's how your employees start to understand what it is and how it works. So, do you guys want to comment on that? Because we've got about
A quick, in the consumer space at least, I don't know if this applies to consulting and other enterprises, but in the consumer space, I also think, just to quickly add to that, if you're starting a new company, it's got to be so simple that you're at a busy brunch in Manhattan on a Sunday, and someone across the table hears the word cars, and they're like, "What? Oh, you should try Tread. It does X. They deliver test drives to your house." It has to be that simple in the consumer space, at least, or it's just not going to to resonate. And the person that told me that was actually Spencer Raskoff from Zillow. Was talking he early on with Tread. He was interested in the concept, thought it made sense, but he said, "You guys are missing a hook. Our hook was the Zestimate. You guys need a hook. Figure that out." And test drives to your home is kind of one aspect of what we do, but it's sort of what we talk about the most because it resonates. So I think in the consumer space, at least, just to echo that, it's really important to be clear about what that is and how it's differentiated.
Yeah, so and again, I would say it's not just consumer. I think that's regardless of your business, it's that important. And simple is complex, right? Because, again, if I had a lot more time, I would have written a shorter letter, right? But simple is really hard, especially when you're passionate about what you're trying to do because you want to say everything. And you're so excited about what you're doing, you always want to communicate everything. And you forget that there is a simple concept that has to connect first with your audience. And until you get that permission, based on that connection, you have no right to go any deeper, right? So eliminate all the cool shit and go right for the very simple phrase that connects directly with your audience. That's the opportunity to go deeper, right? We help entrepreneurs grow their business. Oh, really? What do you mean by that? Let me tell you what I mean by that. Right? It's the availability, it's them giving you the permission once you connect with them emotionally that lets you go deeper and provide more descriptions. So we've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to make this as conversational as possible. So open for Q&A, and as I said before, there's really nothing off the table. It can be related to this, it can be related to startups, anything, whatever you guys want to talk about is cool with me. So.
Hi, great talk, guys. I've seen this construct a couple times before, the first time with pain, and I was wondering, what's your perspective on using the pain point that you're addressing as your competitive differentiation?
I don't think that's the right way to go. I think that addressing the pain is how you connect, but your differentiation is really about how you're going to get someone to believe that you can address the pain. Right, and again, differentiation doesn't necessarily have to be about another company that's possibly doing the same thing, right? Differentiation could be their current process or the current things that they're doing to try and solve the pain. So don't limit yourself from a competition perspective to, we're better than company Y because we make your life better because all those other things that are taking up your time, you shouldn't have to worry about, right? But it needs to be a very specific differentiation around how you're going to solve the pain. Does that make sense? You guys want to, anything?
No, that was perfect.
So I appreciate the getting to the heart of things. There's a lot of noise and voices around these issues. I'd like to hear maybe a couple of book recommendations, some of your top books that you think, and websites.
I think a great book on this topic, and it's actually, I'll make it easy. I'll give you the cheat version. Go to the TED Talk don't waste too much time with the book. The book is good, but the TED Talk really conveys most of it, is Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. And I think it's called The Power of Why. And he talks about how you start with why, not what, when you build a business. And he does a very good job on it. There's a lot more educationally or detailed books on this stuff by, I think it's Trout, T-R-O-U-T, who did a lot of work on positioning. But I'm not a big business book reader. I learn from bad examples and kind of put them in my brain. But Simon Sinek does a very good job if you go to Start With Why.
I would just add to that 4 Steps to the Epiphany by Greg Blank, which is one of the worst reads of my life, but it's really good stuff. And then also Delivering Happiness by Tony, is it Sue?
Shay.
Shay.
That's a good one. And I'd also say, there's a lot of this is inside the whole lean startup concepts as well. So Al Rees and a lot of other people talk about lean startups. That's really what they're talking about, is just iterating on identifying pains. So.
I was just wondering if you all had started out with co-founders. Once you have your big idea, do I absolutely have to have a partner, or should I have a partner, or should I simply just go on my own? And I was just seeing so many relationships go bad and conflict of interest and where the company is going. I'd love to hear your kind of history on that.
You guys want to start? Or? I'm happy to jump in. But
I mean, yeah.
So
I co-founded a company with my mom, and there's a video camera, and I feel like I want to be transparent, but I also want to be empathetic, and that's a really challenging thing to do. I do not believe that you absolutely have to have a co-founder when you're first starting out. What I do think you absolutely must have is a partner that you like, trust, respect, who challenges you, who challenges your thinking, who will not let you out of any conversation easy, and who you will always listen to and keep with you even when you disagree. In fact, I think those disagreements are very, very powerful. So I have that person at Moz today, and that's Sarah Bird, our COO, and actually lots of the whole exec team. I mean, Anthony Skinner, our CTO, and Adam Feldstein, our Chief Product Officer, and Annette, our new CMO. All those people, I invite them, and I want them to disagree with me. But Sarah's been a real partner in the business. I think it would have been nearly impossible to get where we are today without her.
yeah, so I'll add to that slightly, and I agree. I'm not a big fan of absolutes, right? So you have to have a co-founder, you don't. I think the media and Silicon Valley specifically do a very bad job of propagating absolutes, right? You have to do it this way, or you have to look like this, or it has to work. You have to get this kind of valuation in your first round. I think that's all bullshit. But I think what Rand said is critical, right? What you need is a trusted person that constantly pushes back and tests what you're going to do. The other thing I would talk about, and I think one of the most effective traits that I see in CEOs, is knowing what they suck at.
Everything.
Right? And if you know what you suck at, fix that, right? I'm not saying go fix it yourself, but whether it's a co-founder or initial hires, bring in people that don't suck at what you suck at, and that's kind of the best way to approach it.
I'll just quickly add on to that.
Actually, I'm pretty good at Twitter.
You are good at Twitter. Sort of, I would ask, are you an engineer or not? Okay, so I was in the same boat as you. I did not have a co-founder. I was tempted numerous times to partner with someone who had a skill set a lot like mine, sort of more of a sales background, not as much as a building background, and I didn't do it, and I'm really, really glad I didn't do it. I looked like crazy for an engineer, and I couldn't find one, so I had to pay one, and I couldn't actually find, which was a huge mistake, and I couldn't find one until I had raised a decent amount of angel money from some credible human beings. But I think if you have someone that fits that misalignment of skills, you absolutely, to David's point, you want a total misalignment of skills. Do not find someone that's good at what you're good at in the beginning. And it's okay to be by yourself, but it's going to be really hard because there's no one, there's no shoulder to cry on. So that actually can, I think the reason I've seen a lot of my friends.
There's a lot of crying.
Yeah.
Whatever they tell you, there's a lot of crying in startups.
I mean, one of the real, I think high on the list of reasons that non-technical co-founders partner with other non-technical people is just literally to have a shoulder to cry on, and because they're being wusses, you just got to be stronger than that. So anyway.
Yeah, and just one more thing that I thought of when we're talking. So another question you should ask is, what's critical to get my business or potential business to the next stage, right? And how can I do that the fastest? And is it by co-founding with someone? Is it by bringing in some consultants? Is it by outsourcing? You know, whatever it is. But that's really should be your focus. What do I have to do to get the business to the next stage? And how's the best way to do that?
All right, thanks, guys. I was one of Grant and Tread's first customers.
Nice.
Grant and one of his other Tread folks brought 2 cars to my house. And my point is that it made me feel like a total rock star. And my neighbors are looking out their windows, and I have these 2 brand new cars.
You are a
in front
total
of my
rock
house.
star. I mean,
I'll get to that part.
we'll plays with Modest Mouse on and off. So. That's a joke. Sorry.
I think my question is, I wasn't experiencing pain, I don't think. And I was interested in the concept, and I was shopping for a new car, but it's sort of a process that I enjoy. I didn't know I could enjoy it as much as I did when I had 2 awesome, brand new, expensive cars brought to my house for me to play with. So if your company offers that value, where you're not necessarily addressing pain, but you're making people feel better than they thought they could feel about an experience, how do you communicate that, and how do you capitalize on it? Because for me, that's what Tread has going for it, and it's probably harder to communicate than I'll make this pain go away.
I think pain doesn't have to be literal pain, right? It doesn't. You can translate when David says pain, you can interpret that as a strong emotional response that is triggered by your company that is far better than the prior emotional experience, right? So taking a taxi cab is not that bad. Like, you can hop in a cab and then you go somewhere and then you pay them money and it's fine. Uber is not solving this massive pain, but their experience is so much better, right? So much emotionally better, right? You can go and gather all the data that Moz Analytics gives you yourself, and you can go put it in Excel, and you can just do it every week, and you go to all these different sources. It sucks, and it takes a long time, but it's not, it's not the same pain as like, gosh, I could never fly from here to Boise before, and now Alaska has a route. So.
It also could be about discovering pain. And I would say you may not also be the best target audience for trying to get them launched, right? I guarantee you there's a lot of people out there that are scared shitless about buying a new car.
Sure.
And don't want to deal with that process, right? You may be into it, right? But the fact that you're into it and still liked it even better says a lot for how we can address that pain. And I'd also say that, pain is not always obvious, right? So I'm constantly thinking about, like, what do I hate today, right? And I can tell you right now, one of my biggest pains is communication. I hate email. I wish it would freaking disappear.
Oh,
right?
I just sent you one.
Yeah, I know. Because I'm on 12 different platforms and emails and Twitter, like just communication in general, right? And like, that's not something I constantly think about, but you know what? That's when you go a little deeper, it is a pain, right? So it's sometimes it's about educating people and getting them to realize that there really is a pain.
And what I'm kind of thinking about, and we think about this a lot, is like negative positioning versus positive positioning. And on our homepage right now, I think we're going with save 12 hours at dealerships and $3,000 off MSRP. So it's kind of a way. I mean, it's our attempt to say the why, and I'm not sure if that's negative or positive. It kind of feels a little bit skewy negative, but I think that there's
I like it.
You like it?
Yeah, it seems powerful.
Yeah. My thought is that there's a minority of people who really resonate with the negative positioning, and that's more powerful, and then there's a majority that will resonate with the positive positioning, and so we're trying to figure out how to sort of phase that, but it's a fantastic question, and the short answer is I have no idea. So we're working on. I'm
Thanks,
glad that
guys.
you like the service. That's awesome. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I came to this lecture because 10 years ago, I remember hearing a venture capitalist in a conference saying that they don't invest in aspirins. I'm sorry, they only invest in aspirins, not in vitamins, because they want to deal with.
They invest, so that you're saying they only invest in aspirin, not vitamins.
Yes, because
Right.
they want to address the pain,
Right.
not kind of the long-term health. And it's always stuck with me, but at the same time, I wonder who invests in vitamins, because that's exactly what's wrong with the healthcare, right? And so
Preventative medicine, yeah.
And again, I'm not saying you can't do it, right? There's a lot of people out there that do it, but it tends to take a lot more time and a lot more effort and a lot more convincing, right? There's some incredible socially responsible businesses out there that are trying to make the world better, and they're having a horrible, horrible time raising money and getting funded because they're not addressing specific pain points, right? So again, there's no binaries, right? There's no has to do this way. I'm just trying to provide the easiest path.
But you can
to
marry
success.
them. And I think when you marry the two, when you put the vitamin and the aspirin together, that's when you get something really, really special. So I'm addressing this pain, but I'm also preventing future pain. I'm also helping you see further into the future so you can stop yourself from having this problem again. And I think that works.
But until you can cure the headache, they don't care about feeling better afterwards, right? Like you got to get them over the headache first.
Can you talk to me about maybe defendability? You solve the pain point, that's great, but then someone else is going to find how to do solve that same problem better and faster. And like almost any time I've done a startup week, and that's where we always get blasted, is like someone else is going to kill you here. So how does that work?
I always like saying, especially if you're really passionate about the problem and that's what you want to do, I think the best way to avoid the issue of defensibility and competition is to have a way to get market traction faster and better and cheaper than everyone else. And I think that's really where a lot of the success of many startups that are in highly competitive spaces, and there's 10 different companies that are doing it, that's where they have huge successes. They've been out in front and they've gotten the market traction. And so if you can show that repeatable way to acquire customers that has that flywheel mentality, right? It's really hard to get the flywheel going. You push to acquire customers is very hard, but then it gets easier and easier and easier. If you start showing those months of easier and easier traction, lower and lower cost of customer acquisition, more and more traction with that, I think you can fight that argument off.
I'm a big believer in that there's no such thing as defensibility, only teams that work harder, faster, and smarter. So there's nothing to stop anyone else.
And Comcast.
Yes, and Comcast, that's right. And government lobbying. But there's nothing to stop anybody from doing what I do at PivotDesk. Literally nothing, right? Every day we focus on how do we make our customers happier, how do we grow more customers faster, and how do we continue to do it better than anyone else can possibly do it.
I would echo that. Embrace it. If there's competition, that's a good sign. It means you're onto something cool. And so just, keep grinding, keep working hard. And I get a lot of calls from dealers and from companies, Auto Trader, Edmunds, et cetera. Hey, we want to work with you. What are you doing? We really try to learn from them and open lines of communication and talk to them, because maybe they'll buy us, maybe we'll buy them, maybe, you never know. So we have a copycat in Australia and in India already, which I'm psyched about, because I'm learning a ton from both their CEOs who have done some really cool testing. And I'm like, okay, what's working for you guys? Maybe we can do that. And they, sometimes they copy some things we do and vice versa, and it's awesome. So I would embrace it.
Yeah, you can't stop competition. Competition is good. This is about being as good as you can be.
True.
Right? It's about looking in the face of the monster every day and saying, I'm not scared, I'm not afraid, I'm an animal, and I'll eat you if I have to. And you go make it happen.
And
right?
go
I've never
crush
done
it.
that. I have never. It's the opposite of me.
You had mentioned that one of the most difficult things early on is for people to shift what they really want to do and move through that process. And do you have any, you want to hold on to your idea and that's your passion. Any quick ideas of how you move through that and allow yourself to open up to that shift?
Yeah, so the easy answer is funding, right? And to get funded, people want to see market traction. And to get market traction, you have to actually build something that other people want, not just you. So that's kind of a good way to get your brain into how it works. I think that's the difference between a passion and a business. Not that a business can't be a passion, but if you're really just obsessed with doing something beautiful, I think that's awesome, right? But if you really want to make it a big business, you have to switch and understand what the audience wants.
For me, it was switching my mindset from I want this solution to I want to solve this problem. When you want to solve the problem, whatever solution will do.
And then I totally agree with both of those answers. And then I would also say, when I was giving up kind of the custom order idea and going with the deliver to your house idea, the real test for me to get behind it at the end of the day is I looked in the mirror and I said, if I was buying a car, would I use this? Do I want this to exist? And if you can't answer yes to that question, then don't pivot, hang it up, and go do something else. And by the way, that's totally okay. You know, if you hang it up and go do something else, you've just, you know, the faster you can learn that what you're doing isn't going to work for you, the better.
It's really funny. Grant, I had this experience where I was asking myself, like, okay, let's say I left Moz someday. What other startup would I build? And every single other one that I thought about building was like, oh, but I'd have to build this at Moz first. Because everything else was like a platform on top of the shit we're already built. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to stick this out. Yeah.
But the entrepreneurs I've tried to coach, the easy path to success was what you're kind of talking about, to comfort the afflicted. But the big opportunities, the truly big transformative opportunities, were all about afflicting the comfortable. Taking people out there who didn't identify that they had that problem at all and helping them recognize that if that problem's coming at them, you just got to help them become aware of it. You want to address that issue?
Yes, I think the best way to do that, and you know, we're kind of in that situation in that no one thinks there's something inherently wrong with the real estate market. And we are constantly trying to convince people that, wait, there's a better way to do this. There's 98% of the market doesn't really have that pain that they're aware of. But there's 2% of the market that has an intense pain around it. And that's where we start. And once you get an audience, even a small audience, to identify with it, and you start to get people to understand that there is a different way to think about it, that's when you can start going right and left to the bigger audience with the broader solution, as opposed to just attacking the real pain point. But you have to start with an audience, a very closely defined audience that gets the pain. Again, unless you have a lot of money in the bank and a lot of time. But I don't know too many people like that.
Which is not a good thing. Too much money and too much time early on can be really, really, really bad because it can send you down that wrong rabbit hole too. So.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.